Welcome to Grappling with the Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to help us more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason Goldson, and I would like to welcome my guest for today. With me is Diane Helbig, who is Chief Improvement Catalyzer at Helbig Enterprises, providing guidance and training to business owners and leaders around the world. Ryan Kelly is CEO and founder at Human Factors Consulting, LLC. He is an optimistic rebel committed to humanizing leadership, relationships, and workplaces by creating the conditions for people to thrive so your business can too. And Kimi Hirotsu-Zimski is founder of KSP Partnership, providing project management and project leadership courses and workshops to improve team dynamics and communications. Thank you all for being with me.
Delighted.
Thank you
for having me.
And here is our ethical scenario for today. Thanksgiving has become a complicated holiday. Many seem to feel that either we whitewash offenses against Indigenous people or scrap Thanksgiving altogether. But isn't it a sign of maturity to express appreciation for the good while also acknowledging and taking responsibility for the bad? Isn't it the job of education to teach young people the skills to navigate the complexities of history and moral dilemmas? The recent viral spread of Osama bin Laden's letter to America has driven home what many critics of education have railed against for years. Carefully selected excerpts disseminated on TikTok have filled an information vacuum among young people who have been denied basic knowledge and critical reasoning skills to understand the context and significance of history's worst terror attack against the United States. Another popular video showed a young man soliciting signatures on a college campus to support the Hamas charter. Students eagerly agreed to sign. Thankfully, when they were told what the charter contained, they quickly recanted their support. But why did they not first ask to read what they were signing? One young woman, chanting "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," was asked, "Which river?" Her reply, "What difference does it make?" It is encouraging how many contributors have withdrawn their financial support after the recent wave of anti-Semitic violence on many college campuses. But aside from being outraged, what practical steps can we take to address the culture of ignorance and superficiality that is spreading through our society? Lots to talk about. The floor is open.
If I may?
You may.
Critical thinking is probably one of the most underrated skills that we think we are teaching by example, and yet all too often what we teach is our young people that they can get along without it because we clearly do. And
Wow.
it is
nicely.
my way of thinking. It's a foundation of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You should always read anything you sign. You should understand what you sign. And then they see their parents signing paperwork for a home, which admittedly is, about that thick, and not reading a single word of it. You should always tell the truth. And then they hear their parents or their aunts and uncles and godmothers, forgive me, I'm one of them, who will stand at a family gathering and say, "Oh no, you look marvelous. You look just great. Don't even worry about those people. No, you look beautiful." And then when they go home, the very same parent's going to turn and say, "Can you believe she wore that?"
Yeah.
So instead of teaching critical thinking, we're teaching them that it's okay not to pay attention, that certain kinds of lies are all right as long as they're not too hurtful. And as a result, we've given them a sense that as long as you don't, quote, hurt somebody's feelings by asking them to further explain their perspective or their views, it's okay to take them at face value. And
Actually
that is
touched on,
the opposite of
yeah,
critical.
you've touched on a couple of topics that we've addressed in previous episodes. One being those user agreements. Whenever you go, I mean, how long are those things? Yeah, you need half an hour and a higher degree than I have, and then you go ahead and click them and say, yes, I've read this and I agree with it. So we're kind of setting
17
ourselves
minutes
up to be
and a
dishonest.
background in business law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Right. You know, I think part of the problem is, I mean, my personal opinion is, I think these schools are doing a huge disservice to all the students when they aren't teaching them critical thinking, especially because they are all at an age where to expect them to understand it seems misguided to me, because their brains haven't fully developed and they aren't at that point. And so part of the reason to be in college is to learn how to think and learn how to reason and learn how to take a step back and be curious and ask those questions. And I think all of these schools have such an opportunity to convene conversations with their students and say, okay, let's talk about these things. What's your understanding of this? What's your viewpoint? Let's listen to each other peacefully and respectfully. If they were, especially because this is complicated, if they were doing that sort of thing, I think that would help these young people learn how to ask these questions instead of just, you know, they get caught up in the groundswell, which is dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, the University of Chicago a few years ago was one of a very, very small number that came out and said there will be no safe spaces on this campus aside from physical safety. We are here for intellectual inquiry, and part of that means you're going to be uncomfortable some of the time, and
Yeah.
you don't like it, go somewhere else. And to their
If you're
credit,
not
that's been,
uncomfortable, truly, are you stretching?
yeah,
Right.
they're very
Growing,
much the
yeah.
exception than the rule.
Right.
And isn't that part of the question, that isn't that part of the dialogue though, is needing to be comfortable and getting outside our comfort zones? And I come back to a process that I went through, and I think all of us have to some extent. It's unlearning, right? So our parents and our ancestors and our teachers, they do the best they can with what their experience and lived experience and what they know is. And at some point, we have a pushback, a different perspective, and for most of us, it's probably teenage years. Maybe it's a little longer for some, or different points in our life, but life requires us to go through the process of unlearning at times, because there's an attachment oftentimes to being right. And so if you grow up with a perspective and you're taught to just hold on to your perspective of being right, how open are you to hearing a different perspective? And how does that affect the whole discussion in terms of how do I be in a certain situation, or how do I stand up? How do I speak up? How do I, the education system, right? We can point to the education system and it's got its flaws, right? And should they be teaching this or should they be teaching that? Who makes the decisions about what gets taught in school? I mean, we can talk about the teachers, the school environments, all we want, but it's the decision makers that say this is the curriculum that's going to be taught. And the 1960s or 70s curriculum that we may have come through helped us and served us in a way, right? Because we got to where we are. But maybe that needs to adjust now, and maybe leadership needs to kind of come from the people that make the decisions there. And maybe our job is to hold them accountable for that.
I think, yeah.
I'm going to add a caveat here. I am a woman who has been childless by choice and still managed to get 2 stepchildren. I'm not quite sure how that happened. One of the reasons that I made my decisions as I made, which were not terribly popular, by the way, at the time, I was 23, and I had to get a note from my daddy for the surgeon.
At 23.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
She was
That
an
is a whole
adult.
other discussion.
That is a whole other topic about.
That is a whole other topic.
You look good for somebody who was living in the 1800s, Kimi.
Oh,
Yeah. She preserved
don't cry,
well.
though. So the issue that I felt very strongly about and still do is that it is, yes, absolutely, community leaders and decision makers at the community level. It is also every teacher having gone into that field rather later in life. And yet it is true that the whole village, including parents, cousins, grandparents, and I think it's actually more beneficial if we teach critical thinking, not as an exercise, but as a level of curiosity to get in the habit of saying, huh, I wonder why, or huh, how come? And
Yeah,
that children actually start out with, I think we literally beat it out of them half
we
the time.
do. You're right. You're
So
right. Yeah.
that
Why?
ends up
Right?
being unlearned, to Brian's
Yeah.
point. That ends up
And
being
intentionality, right? We
unlearned.
teach them good habits, right? We
Sure.
teach them healthy habits, I should say, not good, but healthy.
Yeah, I saw
But
a
do we?
study recently. I don't know, study or survey something, and I don't remember where, but it said that children at a very young age, I think it was 4, like 90% of them tested genius level, and then that just goes down every year, which is not funny. It's very
We
It's
can't
disturbing.
afford that.
tragic.
Very
We
real.
can't
Of course not.
afford it, and it's a crime
No.
against them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I
I
think.
totally agree.
I mean, how many of you know a child and you think to yourself, what happened? You know the child, you're around the child, and then you don't see them for a while. Maybe a couple of years, circumstances, distance, whatever. And
Yeah.
then you meet them again, and they just seem to be radically different at heart. What the blazes happened?
Well, something probably really tragic happened.
Well, it could be, and I've
Or
seen that and even experienced
just
it. But I think to your point, Kimmy, it's not always a trauma. It's
mm-mm.
sometimes just, it could be benign neglect, which is not benign. It can be indoctrination, even though it may not look like it. I mean, I've told this story frequently that I was teaching 10th grade, and this particular young lady in my class, extremely bright. And I always use the Socratic method. Let them see that they could work their way to the answers. And at one point, she just calls out in exasperation, "Why can't you just tell us the answer?"
And there endeth the lesson,
Well, we kept trying.
unfortunately. Yeah.
But we did, I think we beat a lot of things out of our children. We creativity, curiosity, confidence. Children are like naturally born being confident and not thinking about the consequences of what if someone doesn't like me, this, that, or they have experiences in life that lead some of that into it. But I think the adults, I think we also, maybe it's fear, or we think we're supposed to be shaping them or something. I'm not quite sure what it is, but yeah, I think we're not necessarily serving them. Because could you imagine if kids, they start out curious, they ask why.
Mm-hmm.
It's your favorite word, isn't it? And
Why not?
sometimes we discourage it because we're embarrassed that we don't know the answers. Instead of saying,
And
that's a good question. Why don't we look at that together?
and be willing to demonstrate humble humility in at an intellectual basis as being a good thing, as being a way of growing and getting bigger, as opposed to I've got to be big right this moment.
Ignorance is not a crime, but willful ignorance is. But,
Yes.
Brian, I'd like to go back to something you said about accountability, both in terms of education, also in terms of politics. We can say that there is accountability, right? We can vote our politicians out of office. However, we often don't. And even if we do, there's not a real accountability for the policies per se.
Mhm.
I don't really know how, it's a huge frustration that there's this sort of collective diffusion of responsibility that nobody really knows how the system's gotten out of our hands. And what does accountability look like? How do we come to
So
an informed consensus on what's best when we have trouble agreeing on anything?
can I speak to that, Giannis?
Of course.
Because here in Ohio, we had issue 1 twice. The first issue 1 what was in the spring, and it was whether we wanted to change the majority for citizens from 51% to 60. And the Republicans wanted it changed to 60 to make it harder for changes to be made to the state constitution. It went down in flames. Then issue 1 this fall was about abortion rights. And the citizens of Ohio, by a majority, voted to have it put in the state constitution that women have a right. And I read the bill. It's very short. It's very simple. It's very, common sense, whatever. But this is a conservative state, and that bill won. That issue won. And after it won, the Republicans came out and said, well, we're just going to do something about that. We're just going to change the way the judges rule on these things. Like, they didn't accept the voice of the people, right? And I was
Is anybody
dumbfounded.
holding them accountable?
Right. They need to be voted out. If this is what they're going to do, when we said twice, we're going to say this is, and then they turn around and say, we don't like that answer. Let's change that.
Welcome
Yeah.
to a two-party system and having to live with it, right? Because we're
Yeah,
never going to
yes.
get consensus, right? It's
Yeah.
never for Americans unless we're during campaign season. It's for Americans until it gets to voting time, and then it's us and them, right? And so us
Yeah.
and them is never going to get to consensus. So if I lose, it gets to what Diane was talking about. How am I going to fix that in a different way? Instead
But
of
the
how do we?
people, but the people were in a consensus. The Republicans voted yes on the abortion issue to put it into the Constitution. Like, it won by an amazing majority. So the people were unified. The politicians decided not to do what their constituents are deciding to change what their constituents have said they want. Like,
Well,
there's no
Yeah, one of our
accountability.
constant
but are we holding we elect the politicians, are we holding them accountable in fact or simply in reputation? There's all sorts of news about all sorts of politicians, whether it be United States. Look what's happening to Mr. Trudeau, and we don't even want to discuss the British Prime Minister. And they're being picked on and yelled at, but nobody is being willing to say, for this policy and this reason, you broke this promise.
Yeah,
You
right.
enacted it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to your point, Brian, it's, this two-party system. I mean, this is really one of my pet peeves. And, on the show, we talk all the time about the fallacy of binary thinking, but that's what voting is. It's a binary choice, which is why I have
Either
voted
yes or
third
no.
party in presidential elections far more than I have voted for either the primary parties, because I simply will not let myself be bullied into voting for somebody I think is unfit,
Right.
even if it means that I have to go with somebody that clearly is not going to win. In a way, it's sort of abdicating responsibility for me, because since my candidate can't possibly win, I'm not going to be responsible no matter what happens. But being stuck with those binary choices, we just, especially as the parties become more and more polarized, and this
the parties
way of
themselves.
thinking, you say, "Oh, you broke your promise."
then
Yeah, so now I'll vote for the other guy, and then he'll break his promise. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And so back in 2012, I helped a friend of mine who wanted to run locally for Congress, right? And I'm not I don't get involved in politics. He asked me to get involved because he's my friend, and so I got involved. So, and he was having some success early on. He didn't get to the point where he was going to have significant success, but if he did, all the opposing party would have done is say, let's take this coffer of money and put it here, and you're not going to win. It just becomes, it's a game. It's just a game. It has nothing to do with what the people want, because at the end of the day, it becomes, get elected. What is your job? To get reelected. It becomes, it's just a game. And I saw some of that firsthand. It was just a glimpse into it 11 years ago, but I haven't seen much change in that regard. And he was going to run as an independent, and I think he did run as an independent at that time. So that got me positively charged, because I'm like, yeah, let's have a third entry in there. But think about what it would take for an independent on a major scale to win. It's not going to happen. It just isn't. Unfortunately.
It's unfortunate. Yeah.
One time I can remember did happen in recent history is when Joe Lieberman was he was pushed out of his own party and defeated in the Democratic primary, and he ran for re-election as an independent and won by a landslide.
Right.
But that was because he had already been serving so long that he had established his credibility. They respected him. They didn't care which party he was a part of. So there was an attempt to sabotage better statesmen we've produced in recent times. And fortunately it didn't succeed, but that's just one isolated incident.
It's totally isolated, and it shouldn't be. That should be the rule, not the exception, right?
So how do you then help people to see the value of bucking the binary system? Because when somebody says, well, I voted for the lesser of two evils, oh my word. This is the basis for one of the most important votes you will ever cast, was I dislike that person less. I trusted that person more than nothing.
And the lesser of two evils is getting less and less every time we have to vote.
So I think some of the problems we're talking about are systemic. And some of them, and ironically, the hope in me says that whatever is systemic can be addressed by enough. One person decides, one person decides, one person decides, one person decides. It becomes a question of how likely critical mass is before I die of old age, and I am old right now. So, I'm getting a little scared about that.
If you follow Brett Weinstein at all, he's one of these professors who was fired for saying something that people didn't like, despite the fact that there wasn't anything particularly offensive about it. And he's become one of the media darlings of the right, even though he's relatively liberal. And he started something in the last election. I think he called it the Dark Horse Party. And his vision was to find a moderate Republican, a moderate Democrat, put them on the same ticket, and then flip a coin to see which one's actually president.
Right?
Now, as you can guess, it didn't get real far. But maybe if there are more of these efforts, just to change the way people think gradually.
Maybe if there was more inclination to dismiss it as a funny thing some fellow thought up, and saying, well, wait a minute. Why not? Why? How would that work? Why not try something a little
I will tell you that with this election that we just had, I was stunned at how many people came to vote, and people who had never voted before because they didn't know which door to go in. And, so we had to say to them, no, it's over there, of all ages. And male, female, whatever. And I thought to myself, okay, maybe this younger generation, this is my hope, is that this younger generation that really doesn't understand all the nonsense that, like we grew up with, it is going to come up and say, once as they age, they're going to come up and say, okay, we really are done with this. we are done with this binary choice, this two-party system, this nonsense of going into your camp and not coming out. And so maybe there's hope that way. Maybe we'll see it before we leave.
Yeah,
What do
I'm
you
not a
think,
huge
Brian?
fan
Does
of
that play
Thomas
into your issue
Jefferson.
of accountability?
Yeah,
I'm not a
I
huge
don't
fan
know
of
what the
Thomas
answer is,
Jefferson. He
right?
was brilliant, but I think deeply flawed individual. But his conviction was that when the system stops working, you blow it up.
Right. Or you blow them up. Oh,
Yeah,
wait.
you don't fix
Well,
it, you
that's
blow it up, exactly, and create a new one. Exactly.
it's kind of funny because he railed against the Federalists, and then when he got into power as president, he realized, oh, you actually have to make decisions,
Oops.
and you have to do things that some people aren't going to like, like by reality. But it
And it's
really is,
complex.
yeah, no, it's incredibly complex. It's getting more complex,
Yeah.
and we feel kind of, impotent. We recognize so clearly things are not working, and there's this tremendous cultural inertia that carries them forward. And one of the things I point to, I remember when there was you remember the what was it called, McCain Feingold, the campaign reform
Uh-huh.
legislation.
Uh-huh.
I was so excited about this. It was such a great idea. Get the money out of politics, and it completely backfired
Of course.
because it channeled all the money into political action committees, which are by
Yeah.
definition more polarized and more extreme. When it went into the parties, at least they had to have some kind of consensus. And
Yeah.
now, the more passionate you are, the more extreme you're likely to be. And it just made things worse. So here you've got what appeared to be a great solution that ended up having exactly the opposite effect of what was intended.
Well, there was no what if.
Well,
Right?
I also want to, poor Brian, he's going to think, oh
I
my God,
know.
woman thinks all I've said is one word. I also think it comes down to accountability, though. This is what it was intended to do. Not working quite right in project management, we call it course correction. Everybody else I know calls it incremental improvement or tweaking it just a little bit. But, something gets done, pat ourselves on the back. This is marvelous. This is wonderful. And then everybody walks away and says, oh, you screwed up the implementation. Okay. What happened to the we? What happened to the accountability we were willing to take as a people to address that?
Yeah.
But only address it. We didn't lick the stamp and actually send it. We just addressed that to me is kind of almost a good metaphor for why people talk about accountability, but then manage to slide out from under it a great deal.
We see that a lot, right? It's not just in politics. It's not just in education. I have a project management background as well, and Kimmy, and it's we claim success, and then the implementation didn't go well, and then the blame wagon goes one direction, and it's like, well, we're too concerned with claiming success so we can look good, and it's like, okay, well, there's sort of a root here that goes pervasively throughout all aspects of society and culture. And so I don't think there's an answer for the two-party system. I've thought about this. There's probably answers to it. Are there going to be ones that are going to get entertained? With people voting on one side or the other, we'll never get to consensus. So likely no, reality-wise. My hope, to Diane's perspective, is that my nephews, and the people of and my niece and people of younger generations will say enough. And I saw a little bit of that when I was in corporate, when I was managing the millennials coming off the college campus and kind of there, hey, what this technology is like archaic. Why aren't we doing it this way? Why don't we do it this way? And it's like, yeah, we've been saying that for 10 years, but that's how things move in the real world, unfortunately. Help us create different, though, right? Help us create better, right? And that's why, creating better is not fixing the existing, it's creating new. And we see that in not just politics, I think it's in the workplace too. And that's why I do what I do. It's that when we get to the human factors mattering, I think we change a lot of different things.
I hope.
Yeah, I do think it's a leadership challenge. and it's not just in politics. Like I look at some of these leaders. My thing is, especially in with sports teams and things, you know, you're a steward of those players, of those children, of those people. And so you have an extended obligation. It's not just about teaching them the game and helping them win. It's teaching them how to be, it's role modeling being a good citizen. And we just don't have enough leaders. If you look at corporate and these guys who are going to jail for, you know, all these things that they're doing, and U of M, it's pervasive sign stealing and just all of these things. And they don't stop and think, okay, wait a minute, people are watching, children are watching. And what lessons are we teaching them? To win at all cost? That's not the lesson we want to send them into the world with. So I feel like this is just a big leadership failing.
I'm not sure that people don't think it's the lesson they want to send their children out in the world with, because there are some folks, and I had to leave a gathering recently, and somebody was expounding on how, well, I of course I'm teaching them this because I want them to win. And I said, at all costs, yes, because if they don't win, then they lose, and I don't want my children to lose. And I thought, you've already set them up to do so. I need to leave before my mouth and this glass of wine enter places where it should not. So I
Right.
kind of bustled out and made my apologies to the host. And he said, where are you going? And I said, I feel too strongly about this to be kind. I
Yeah.
have no grace when it comes to responding to that. And I'm working on that. But in the meantime, I
Fine.
didn't feel it would be meet to, you know, do that to your gathering and blow it all up from inside.
Yeah.
But I had to leave. It's okay to teach people to beat people into the ground so that you aren't.
Right. It's not how we operate in a society. Well, it's not how we're supposed to operate in a society. I guess that's what I should say.
My son was in Little League, and I think he was in third grade and fourth grade, third grade. He was on a very competitive team. It was the most competitive league in the city, and I don't think we won any games that year. But,
Okay.
even though we had a former World Series pitcher for a coach, but in any case, we were playing a team. I think they had been ranked third in the country the previous year.
Oh my.
And we were told that I was talking to the coach, our coach, he told me that these kids had to remake the team every month. Because if their play was not up to par, they were cut and somebody better was brought on.
In Little League?
In Little
How
League,
old
in
is this?
third grade.
Oh my God.
Oh,
And
no.
The first we
No.
played this team twice. The first time they massacred us. The second time we were ahead until the last inning.
Wow.
And it was quite a lesson to watch these coaches. They were apoplectic. They were ready to kill. They were absolutely furious that these kids were causing them to lose. Watching
There's
this
the
thinking,
message right
who
there.
is this for?
Yeah. Oh my God. You know, my son had a teacher like that in fifth grade, and she was, it was this horrible thing that happened. And I, of course, sent an email to the principal saying she needs to apologize to those children because they know what she did was wrong. And she just needs to own it. She needs to. And so the principal blacked out my name and anything referring to me and gave it to the teacher. The teacher still knew it was me who did it and would not back down, would not admit that she wanted to win so badly that she didn't let all the kids play. And it wasn't a competitive environment. All the children were supposed to be able to contribute. And these kids were just sitting there, and the parents were all upset and yelling at the teacher. And it was like, okay, you know, that's not helpful, but you brought it on yourself. She would not own it. And that's a huge lesson, fifth grade, that these kids, if they have parents who say, you know, like I did, well, learn from it. great, but not all the parents are going to do that, for their kids. So adults, not so great.
And scary.
I
It's
wonder if
very
maybe what we need
scary.
to do. Go ahead, Ryan.
It's very scary. And an incident with middle school, right? So my nephew's middle school basketball, and we entrust kids to leaders, whether they're teachers, whether they're coaches. We didn't trust them, right? End of the game, with my nephew's team's down by I think 1 point, and he gives them some guidance. We don't really know what it was, but at the end of the game, and so my nephew ends up getting the ball on the inbounds, takes it down the court, makes the decision based on what the defense is doing, goes to his left, he's right-handed, takes a shot, misses the shot. The first thing the coach says to him afterwards is, "Why did you go to your left?"
What?
And so it was about him going to his left. And so I couldn't figure out the rest of the season. My nephew would never dribble with his left hand anymore, because the coach said you shouldn't be dribbling with left hands. Don't shoot 3-pointers. And I'm like, okay. So I'll be able to, and his father and I kind of help him through navigating what can you learn from a situation and leave the rest behind kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of stuff people are getting exposed to, and kids are getting exposed now, because the mindset's pervasive. And so we as influencers, parents, uncles, aunts, mothers, have to maybe up our game a little bit in terms of, hey, challenge ourselves on our perspectives and what can we be doing better. And that's something I need to be doing, I know. And I try to do that too, because I get involved with the games and cheer and all that. And I'm like, wait, I'm being who I'm trying to not. And but the element of winning, what does winning mean? What does success mean? And my brother's trying to teach him, I'm trying to support with, it's trust, believe in the process, don't focus on the results. The results will come. What is the learning that happens? And take the learning from each situation. And he's fortunate now, because he just made the varsity team, that the environment there's totally different. But I can't think of two extremely diametric, between one season, which is a full year ago, and now, two diametrically opposed environments. And we were legitimately concerned about where's he going next, because it matters to him, right? He's doing well in school from an academic standpoint, but this matters to him too. And what about the kids that don't have that? He's got friends from AAU that are in similarly bad situations. Who's responsible for that? And the person, when he got challenged, the coach, he's like, I have 15 years of coaching while we're on. And then so my response to my brother privately was, you've got 15 years of coaching, you're coaching middle school basketball, why are we bragging about that kind of thing? In terms of, and so like he wouldn't listen to input, right, from the kids. And the kids, they would make suggestions based on, well, what if we did this, because this doesn't seem to be working, kind of thing. And Landon was trying to be a leader and speak up, and didn't want to hear that kind of stuff. And so the gratitude I have is that he got exposed to both good and bad coaching, and learning that sometimes you just have to take the learning that's valuable and leave the rest behind, and appreciate what you can out of a situation, which I think human beings in general, adults even, have trouble doing sometimes as well. But sports can be an avenue for that. Different teams, debate teams, when you're in an environment where there's competition, can you compete well? And the scoreboard doesn't necessarily tell you whether you succeeded or not. That's a question I think we need to consider.
I feel like you just answered the question, what can we do about all of these things? It feels like we start with kids when they're young, and we teach them, it's okay to be exposed to these situations. It's how do we help them walk through them, to be able to learn how to assess. And if we start when they're younger, they'll know how to be more curious and more critical in their thinking when they're older.
And not a single teacher, a single coach, a single, I apologize for Ginger, she's upset, I'm up here, she's down there.
Can't hear her.
But not let a single teacher define us at our lowest point, or a single teacher define us at our highest point.
Yeah, right.
That's
And
a-
so important, because think of
Yeah.
a 12, 13-year-old that the coaches tell me doesn't have a left hand. And he goes to training and works on both hands the whole time. He knows it's not true. And so he
Yeah.
was almost in defiance. Like he had his time, he had both hands out, obviously, but he was playing right-handed the whole time, the rest of the season. I didn't notice it until the end of the season, actually. And
Wow.
think about a kid that chooses to do that because of the environment there. And so part of it is, yes, Diane, what you were saying, and not just we teach the kids, but what if the adults kind of become vulnerable and own that they may need some support in getting to a better and
Yeah.
healthier place
Yeah.
to be in that role to serve kids. Maybe
Yeah.
that's an opportunity as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And as long as, as long as kids in that age group have parents who are alert,
Yeah.
and understand how, when to intervene,
Yeah.
that can mitigate damage from that kind of situation. Once we send them away to college, it gets a lot more complicated.
And not every kid has that even now, right?
Well, even right,
Right.
exactly. That's right. But,
Right.
I think, well, maybe we'll follow that up in the follow-up segment. So we haven't solved the problems of the world, but maybe we frame them a little better. And it's always the value of these
Hopefully
conversations.
we turned it a little bit so we all got a chance to see it from a slightly different angle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why we're here. Because
Yeah.
to be ethical, you have to see as much of the picture as you can, and that means you have to examine all the angles. And we hope we can accomplish some of that here. So thank you, Diane Helbig, Brian Kelly, Kimi Hirotsuzinski. Always a pleasure, really, really stimulating conversation. And for those of you who are watching or listening, if you have a topic you'd like us to take up, please go to my website, ethicsninja.com, use the contact information, send in your idea. If it's compelling, we will definitely take it up for a future episode. And until then, I hope that you will continue to grapple with the gray.